Hi, everybody. Welcome to Psych 220. Today is the very first day of class, and I'm going to just run you through very briefly the course expectations, some important things that you need to know in order to be successful in this class this semester. All right, so to begin with, my name is Dr. Lawrence Beamer. There's my email address that you can contact me at. You can also reach me through the Canvas page as well. I prefer that you send me an email, just because sometimes I don't always have easy access to the Canvas page, whereas emails routed to my phone and things like that. So I typically see emails that are sent to the MSU account far quicker than I see anything sent through Canvas. But anyway, a little bit of background on me. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Portland. I didn't go straight to graduate school. I spent some time working in government for a while, and then eventually, after about 10 years or so, went to graduate school. And I got my master's in experimental psychology from Western Washington University, which is a small public liberal arts school that's right on the border of Washington State and Canada, pretty close to, kind of in between Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia. From there, I finished up my PhD at Washington State University under the supervision of Dr. Lisa Fournier. And from there, I went to get my postdoctoral appointment, did my postdoc at Brooklyn College of CUNY. That's how I, over time, became associated with Montclair. So I've taught classes on the campus as well as online. And typically now I just teach online because I have a full-time teaching job these days in Chicago. I do research. It's not terribly pertinent to this class, but just I consider myself a cognitive scientist. I use big data tools, things like creating computational models, or I engage in programs where I collect massive data sets online using things like Amazon Mechanical Turk. But also at my university where I'm located, run some typical sort of behavioral studies where we have undergraduate students that sign up to participate through the subject pool or the SONA system, and they sign up to participate in my experiment, come into the lab, run them through a paradigm. I also do some brain imaging work as well, right? So a little bit of cognitive neuroscience. I use EEG and TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And basically, I would say that I study learning, memory, and cognitive control. And I am very interested in sort of clinical applications to motor behaviors. For example, I'm interested in understanding more about the motor system for people with mobility disabilities. The idea is that I'm interested in using cognitive neuroscience tools to help improve things like brain-machine interfaces. In other words, devices that people can wear on their head that are connected to like an exoskeleton or a neuroprosthetic that can help people who can't move, can help them to have some control of a robotic prosthetic. All of my research is reasonably up to date there. If you're interested, you can log on to that ResearchGate site and read some of my current papers. All right, so about this class, this is just a very fancy, long-winded way of saying that you're going to learn how to do statistics. And the important thing to understand here in this class is that we're not going to ever be doing math for math's sake, right? This is really, in many respects, we're going to be learning how to do mathematics that are applied to some specific problem as it pertains to a question of research in psychology. So we're going to be learning a whole mess of different statistical techniques that help us analyze data as they pertain to questions in psychology. And hopefully, as psych majors, this is a required class you have to take, so hopefully it's something that you find very engaging and interesting. For those of you that are psych majors that are taking this, you'll have to take some sort of research methods class as well. In this class, it was sort of intimately linked to that. You can think of the statistics and research methods as a series, if you will. And the things that I teach you here in statistics over the course of the semester will be things that you apply when you get to your research methods class. And if you're interested in the field of psychology as a science, you're interested in going to graduate school, then all of these fundamental things that you learn in this class will be something that is quite robustly applicable to future classes. So again, here's the things we're going to do, right? Again, just another sort of syllabusy way of saying you're going to learn how to do statistics. You're going to learn how to analyze data. You're going to learn how beyond sort of just running the numbers and sort of looking at results, we're going to really think in terms of what that data means in terms of asking questions in the field of psychology. And once we get through the first first few weeks of just learning the basics, we're really going to dive into this idea of using statistics to not only answer questions about different constructs within psychology, but also making sure that we understand them, we understand what those constructs are, and we understand what our results mean. Here's the textbook. And like I said, I posted a comment earlier, I think an announcement of the ISBN number and the citation of the textbooks. You should be able to find this, in my opinion. Best strategy is to just find it online. Typically, you can rent this as an ebook through Amazon for fairly cheap for the semester, and I don't think that that's a very bad strategy at all. If you're interested in going to graduate school and you think, oh, well, I might want to keep this as a reference material. That's a fine idea, but just a sort of little bit of foreshadowing. When you get to graduate school, you'll have to take a statistics course again. It will be a bit more advanced, but it will certainly, be building on the things that you learned in this class. So, if you don't feel the need to hold on to this book for any sort of reason for future development, then renting the ebook from Amazon is just fine, or anywhere, however you want to do it. Okay. So about this class, this is an online class, but I treat this as a scheduled class because I don't think this class works as an independent study, right? It's too much of a pain for the students. Too many students fall behind in my early attempts at doing this class to make it an independent study. Often I find myself inundated with too many assignments at sort of the last second to grade, and it just doesn't make sense. I also think that the future of online education is creating a situation in which we can reproduce the classroom environment as close as possible, right, in a virtual setting, right? So because of that, I run this as a scheduled class. So it's as if we meet every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. Now, does that mean you have to log on at 9 a.m. every single Tuesday and Thursday? The answer to that question is no, right? You have a little bit of flexibility, of course, which is one of the features of an online education. Typically everything, obviously, not typically, everything is going to happen in the Canvas course website, right? And just about everything that you need to find, you can find under the Modules tab in Canvas. And if you look on there, you'll see that the class is separated into 3 distinct modules, one module for each exam. Here's a screen capture of what an older version of my class looks like, right? So, if you were to click on this exam 1 right here, it would open up to something like this, right? And here you see the syllabus, which should be the very first thing you see under exam 1. And then, again, this is a class that I did a long time ago, but here you see a bunch of lectures. And ideally, once these are posted, you can simply click on them, and it will take you to the YouTube site where you can watch them. So everything can be found under the Modules tab. That's everything: quizzes, assignments, lectures, exams. All of it will be found under the Modules tab. So typically, every Tuesday and Thursday, I will post a new lecture, right? And you will find those lectures on Canvas under the Modules tab. In the title of the lecture, right? So this is a little bit different, but because I'm now linking to my YouTube page. But in the future, in the title of the lecture will be some sort of code in all these different titles that you'll need to enter in order to have access to the video. Because I do teach multiple stats classes, and I don't want students to take the live class with me, skipping class and just watching the lecture. So I make sure that for those of you that are taking it online, you have to access it via a password. But once you enter the password, it will take you to that day's lecture. So every Tuesday and Thursday, or most Tuesdays and Thursdays, I will post new lecture content at 9 a.m., right? 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll get to the schedule in a bit, but there will also be homework assignments, and homework assignments will also be due on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, we'll only have 7 homework assignments for the whole semester, so obviously that doesn't mean that there's an assignment due every Tuesday and Thursday, but on the days that an assignment is due, it will be either a Tuesday or Thursday. And this also goes for things like quizzes and exams, right? Quizzes and exams will also happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But again, accounting for the fact that sometimes people take online classes because they're working, you'll have a 24-hour window with which to take the exam. Of course, once you start the exam or the quiz, whatever time limit is associated with that exam or quiz will start running, right? So if you have 75 minutes to take exam 1, you can take it at 9 o'clock at night the day that the exam goes live. But at that point, as soon as you start taking it, you'll have 75 minutes. You won't be able to save your work or go back to it at a later time. Once you start, you'll have to finish. So let's just jump right into the assignments. Like I said, we have 7 homeworks, 7 worksheets that are going to cover concepts from every chapter. And these worksheets are going to contain things like conceptual questions about statistics and psychology and experimental designs. These worksheets are going to require that you perform using your calculator by hand, showing your work. Fairly robust statistical computations. And typically each worksheet will cover multiple chapters. Now, depending upon how difficult the assignment is, typically each worksheet takes about 60 to 120 minutes to complete. Like I said, each worksheet covers multiple chapters. So let's say you have a worksheet due for chapters 4 and 5, and you listen to lecture 4 on Tuesday, right, the day that I put it up. Well, you can do all of the problems on that worksheet that are associated with chapter 4 immediately, right? You don't have to wait until you see chapter 5. Then maybe on Thursday, the lecture for chapter 5 drops, and that'll give you all that you need to know between the readings and the lectures to go ahead and finish out that homework. And that's what I would do if I were you. I wouldn't wait until the very last minute before the assignment's due to do the entire homework, because you can very easily get behind there. I would answer the questions on every homework assignment that you can after you've done the reading and after you've watched the corresponding video. Now, there are some protocols here, if you will, right, of how I want the homework turned in. And this is non-negotiable. So this is very important that you do this correctly, because it's for your benefit and it's certainly for my benefit as well. So all of the worksheets can be found under the module tabs, and each worksheet will become available the day I start the lecture for that particular series of chapters for that worksheet. So what you need to do is print out that worksheet, right? It'll be online either as a PDF or a Word document. I don't remember exactly, but it doesn't matter. You need to print out the worksheet, and you want to do your worksheet using pencil or erasable pen. There will be several instances in which you should show your work, right, which you're required to show your work. And most of the time, there should be enough space in the worksheet for you to do that. If not, you can always use some scratch paper, right? Make sure that if you're using scratch paper for a problem, right? Like let's say you've done problems 1 and 2 on the worksheet, you get to problem 3, you need to use some scratch paper. That's great. On your scratch paper, put a nice big 3 there, circle it, and make sure that it's very clear to me if I'm looking at your scratch paper, where you've done your work. And I say, you must always show your work in equations for full credit. And the reason why is I give partial credit where it's applicable, right? Particularly when we start dealing with very long sort of formulas, right? We might find some scenarios, we will find some scenarios in this class where maybe running a statistical test requires that you perform computations on 3 separate equations. But the answer to the first equation gets carried into the second equation. And the answer in the second equation gets carried into the third and final equation. And in many instances, it can be possible to make a very simple math error on that first equation and get that answer wrong. It stands to reason if you carry that incorrect answer into the remainder of the 2 equations that you have to do, well, ultimately you're going to end up with the incorrect answer, right? Well, what I do is I look at the work that you've done, right? And if I see that sort of thing has happened, like you made a mistake in the first part of the equation and you carried that wrong answer into the remaining problem, but you did everything else in that problem correctly, right? If you would have got the very first answer correct in the first equation, you probably would have got the correct answer when it was all said and done. Instead of marking that as a completely wrong answer, right, and you're not getting any credit, I tend to, take off maybe 0.5 to 1.5 points. Just depends on how extensive the error is. So if you show your work and you only make one minor math error, but everything else is correct, then you're going to get a heck of a lot more credit than if you don't show your work and you just put in an answer and that answer is wrong, right? If I don't have any way of knowing what it is that you've done, then it's impossible for me to give you partial credit. But regardless, always circle your final answer so I can find it easily. I'll say this, and you'll hear me say this over and over again through the course of this semester. The key to this class is the math is not terribly difficult. The key is just keeping organized, right? If you're doing a 3-part equation that requires that you carry answers from one equation to the other, it's just making sure that all of that is organized in a way that makes sense. It's easier for you to find and easier for me to find when I'm grading it. All right, so now you've done your homework assignment, right? You've printed out your original worksheet. You've got all the answers on that original worksheet. You've used some scratch paper. Your scratch paper is clearly marked and organized, so it's easy for me to look through. What you need to do now is scan each and every page, both sides, scan each and every page of your worksheet as well as your scratch paper, and upload them to Canvas as a single PDF. Now, there are a number of different ways that you can scan your work. Most printers these days have a scanning function, so you might be able to do it that way. If you have access to the university, there are scanners at the library that you can use. If you're a distance learner and your printer that you have doesn't have a scanner, that's okay. There are apps that you can download on your phone, such as Cam Scanner, like camera scanner. Cam Scanner, which is free. You have to learn how to use it. I'll leave that to you. But you can scan multiple pages into a single PDF. But regardless, you must scan all your worksheets, right? Scan all the pages of your worksheets, scan the scratch paper, turn it into a PDF, and upload it into the appropriate assignment on Canvas. Now, I want to be clear, right? Or even right out the gate, even for assignment 1, this is the only way that I will accept homework. If you turn it in as a bunch of pictures, like JPEGs, for example, if you just turn in a Word document, anything like that, you will get a 0, even for assignment number 1. So we're not going to play this game where we give some sort of grace period for the first assignment, because I'm explicitly telling you what it is you need to do, and you have time to ask me if you have any questions, right? You must turn the assignment in using this format in order for me to even be willing to grade it. And I will not chase you down if it's in the wrong format, right? You know what you need to do. If you have any questions, you can ask me. So everything needs to be turned in as a PDF. You need to scan your work. You need to show your work. Okay. Like I said, worksheets are typically due on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 a.m. I will not accept any late assignments. So here's a little snippet right here of the syllabus, right? And so note here, right, that worksheet 1 is going to be due September 19th. So wherever there's a worksheet number in here, that's the day that it's due. So worksheet 1 will be live. It might be live by the time you're watching this video. If not, worksheet 1 will definitely be available on September 10th. So on September 10th, I'll lecture on Chapter 1, the Introduction to Statistics. And you'll be able to answer some of the questions on worksheet 1 as they relate to questions, or as they relate to chapters 1. That following Thursday, I'll lecture on Chapter 2, which is frequency distribution. So again, worksheet 1 will have some questions about frequency distributions. And then finally, on the 17th, I'll lecture about Chapter 3, which is measures of central tendency. Again, worksheet 1 is going to have questions from chapters 1, 2, and 3. So by the time I finished uploading, you finish watching that lecture on or around September 17th on Chapter 3, you'll have everything that you need between the lectures and the reading materials in the textbook in order to finish up worksheet 1. And that must be turned in to Canvas as a PDF. That means every page of the worksheet as well as the scratch paper, again, as a PDF onto Canvas under the Assignments tab, which you can find in the modules for worksheet or homework 1. So 9 a.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, September 19th, first assignment is due. Note here, the second worksheet is due September 26th by 9 a.m. and so on. So if you look at the syllabus, you'll see the schedule for when all the worksheets are due. So again, late assignments will not be accepted. This class moves quite fast. In fact, on the day that you turn in a worksheet, right? So for example, the worksheet is due, worksheet 1 is due September 19th at 9 a.m. By the end of the day, I will post a detailed answer key, right? That shows you, how you should have answered all these questions. And I really highly advise that you look at them because they're great study guides. I've taken a lot of time and effort to provide a great deal of detail. So not only will the answer key tell you exactly how you should have done every problem, but I have sort of a running narrative on all the different steps that I take to solve these problems. In that key, you'll also see where I took off points, right? So a lot of times, because I have a lot to grade, I might just be -1, -2, -1. I might not give a lot of explanation on your homework assignments. But when you look at the answer key, you can match up where I deducted points with the justification for why those points were deducted. And of course, if you have any questions about grading, you can always reach out to me. I will not accept any assignments via email. So when it's time to turn in an assignment, you need to turn that assignment in on Canvas in the appropriate assignment drop. And then your work has to be your own, so you can't work on these as a group. If I determine that you are working on them with one or more people, that would certainly be considered cheating. Just like taking the exam with a bunch of your classmates at the same time, for example, in the same room would be considered cheating. And if I determine indeed that this has happened, then that's certainly cheating. And if that's the case, not only would you get a 0 and everybody involved would get a 0 for that assignment, but I would report it to the chair and the dean at the very first offense of cheating. So just make sure that you're doing all of these 7 homework assignments on your own, and you're not getting help from, or well, you're not working on them with somebody else. I'll grade them as quickly as possible. I want to turn them around as quick as possible so that you know how well you've done, you know how well you're doing in the class. Like I said, detailed answer keys will pop up on Canvas around 5 o'clock on the day that the homework assignment is due. So, right, homework assignments are due at 9 a.m. Later on that day by 5 o'clock. That's when you'll see the detailed answer key. I've already said this here, right? I am a big believer in partial credit, right? It's easy to make a little minor mistake in a long problem, and I don't feel like that should ruin, your grade. It seems a bit silly, particularly if everything else was correct, right? It's only a mistake on one aspect of it. So that's why I say show your work. If you show your work, I can see what you did. And if I see just one minor mistake, well, that could be the difference of a deduction of, say, half a point or 1 point compared to a deduction of 7 points, right? So show your work. And note here, and this is particularly applicable to short answer questions on homeworks and exams, don't do the give the multiple answer thing. Sometimes students will not be entirely sure whether one answer or another answer is the correct response on an exam, so they'll give both in hopes that I pick one. And I won't do that. I'll just mark it as wrong, right? So you need to take your position about what you think a correct answer is, and only give one answer. If I see multiple answers, then I'm not going to pick which one I want to grade. You're just going to get it wrong. All right, so all of these worksheets, these 7 worksheets, are worth 50% of your grade, which I think is quite fair, because you can really control how well you do on these worksheets, right? You've got plenty of time to work on them. You got plenty of opportunity to ask me questions about things that you don't understand. So half of your grade is going to come from a lot of effort that you can directly control, right? So, you should be running up the score on these worksheets, right? You shouldn't be doing poorly on them. A couple of things to pay attention to, right? Again, always show your work, make sure it's organized, always show the formulas. You can lose anywhere from half to 2 points on any problem where you don't show the formulas for your work and your work. And I will say, missing one worksheet is kind of interesting fact here about not turning in assignments. So if you didn't turn in one of the worksheets, it's only worth 7.2% of your final grade. Now, that's not a trivial amount. That's almost a full letter grade. but it's worth exactly 7.2% of your final grade. But what I find, I've run a lot of well, not a lot, but I've ran statistical analyses on these, as I do every semester when I teach this class. And I found that people who failed to turn in at least one worksheet actually perform worse than one letter grade than their average class, right? So even though it's only worth 7.2% of your overall grade, it actually costs you a heck of a lot more than that. And I think the reasoning here is because if you failed to turn in a worksheet, you failed to do all the important homework, associated with those chapters, right? So then when you get to the exam, not only are you missing points for not turning in the worksheet, but there's things that you get to the exam you don't understand, and as a consequence, you miss a lot of points there. So really, I can't stress enough how important it is to get these worksheets done, turned in. Make sure you do it on time, because I won't accept late work, and make sure that if you have any questions, you reach out and ask me. Quizzes. We're going to have 8 pop quizzes throughout the semester. I'm going to end up dropping the lowest 2. And now the quizzes will be drawn from topics about that day's reading. So here's another snippet from the syllabus. So for example, on September 10th, you should have already read, right, before September 10th, chapter 1. And it's possible, admit it's highly unlikely, but it's possible that on September 10th, I might put up a quiz, maybe a 5-7 multiple choice short answer question quiz, probably even less questions than that, about stuff that you should have known from reading chapter 1, right? Typically the quizzes are quite simple. If you've done the reading, you're in good shape on the quizzes. That says you'll have 1 to 15 minutes to complete. Actually, that should say that you should have 10 to 15 minutes to complete the quiz. And again, I know students are working sometimes. That's why they're taking online classes. So what I do is that the quiz becomes available at 12 a.m. on a Tuesday or Thursday, right? So that may not be terribly helpful depending on where you are, but it sort of comes live in the middle of the night, if you will, right? You might be asleep by then. But it stays up all the way until 11:59 that day, right? So if I were to give a quiz about chapter 1, I'd give it on the 10th, right? And that would become available at 12 a.m. and it would stay up all the way until 11:59 p.m. that day. And if you don't take the quiz within that window of time, right, that basically 24-hour window of time, well, then you would have missed the quiz, right? There's no making up missed quizzes. So at some point every day, it's a pretty good strategy to at least check in on Canvas to see if I've posted a quiz. You can find them, of course, under the modules tab, like you can everything else. It'll also give you a good opportunity to see if I've posted any announcements. So treat every Tuesday and Thursday checking into Canvas as your sort of way of attending class, if you will. And like I said, they'll be pretty short. Most of the time, no more than 5 questions, but sometimes they're a little bit longer. And they should only take about 10 to 15 minutes on the long end of things to complete. And of course, just like exams, once you start them, you'll have to complete them in that particular sitting. Now, if you missed a quiz, you can't make it up, right? So again, like I said, if I were you, I would check Canvas every Tuesday and Thursday to see if there's going to be to see if I've put a quiz up. Don't email me to ask me if there's going to be a quiz. I won't even respond to those emails. Don't email me to ask me if you missed a quiz. I won't respond to those emails either. I will say this though, and in this there's an exception. And that is if you have to miss a class because of a university sanctioned event or some religious observance, then if that's the case, it's your responsibility to turn in any assignments that are due prior to your absence ahead of time, right? So, and also furthermore, you need to notify me of any authorized absences during the very first week of class. And if you are going to miss a quiz or something like that, obviously I'll know what the schedule is. And I'll make some sort of arrangement for you to take that quiz prior to the dates that you'll be absent. But again, only university sanctioned or religious observances, and you must let me know the very first week of class. Again, your quizzes are worth overall 10% of your grade. So we'll take 8 of them throughout the semester. I will drop the 2 lowest. So I'll only grade your 6 best efforts. Exams, we're going to have 3 of them. They're not cumulative. Exams will consist of 30 multiple choice questions and 6 to 10 short answer questions. For exams 1 and 2, you're going to have 75 minutes to complete them. You'll have 120 minutes to complete the final. You can use both sides of a 3 by 5 inch note card. That's totally fine. You can't use your book. You can't use other materials. You can't use the internet, but you can write whatever you want down on a note card, 3 by 5 inch note card, both sides. And you'll also have use of a calculator. You're going to want to use your calculator. Make sure that you have Respondus Lockdown installed. And believe me, if I feel anything is going on that doesn't make sense to me as I'm grading, right, I will go back and look at these Respondus Lockdown videos and make sure that you're not doing anything that you shouldn't be doing. Also, you're responsible for the quality of the internet where you take the exam. So, for those of you that are well versed in online classes, this should be, pretty easy concept for you. But, my internet went down in the middle of the exam is not going to be an excuse for me to let you take the exam again, right? It's up to you to make sure your internet connection is solid, or wherever it is you're taking the exam, because any sort of technical difficulties in that regard is not something that's going to sit well with me. It's all the things that we do in this class, right? The worksheets that you do, the quizzes. There's even practice problems that I put at the end of every chapter in the lectures. All of these are fantastic study tools. In addition to that, there's a fairly detailed study guide that will get posted. And all of these things should funnel you in the direction of being able to do quite well on the exam. And what can you expect? Well, the computational work on the exam is actually going to be quite minimal, right? Because I don't have time to have you do, really long statistical mathematics problems. But you should make sure that you know your formulas, right? If you're not comfortable with memorizing your formulas, then you can put your formulas down on your 3 by 5 note card. Because there will be several situations in which, I might give you everything you need to know to plug into a formula, and then you might have to figure out the answer from that. But there won't be situations where you have to run big statistical tests from scratch, right? Because that just takes too long. And that's stuff that you're going to be doing on the homework. So I've got plenty of opportunities to assess your ability there. And a lot of the exams are going to be conceptual in nature, right? And we'll talk about that. I'll sort of explain things, give you examples of sort of questions I like as we go through the course content, in the lectures throughout the semester. But, there might be questions in which, you're given an experimental scenario, and based on what you've learned in the class, you'll have to answer questions about, what type of experiment is it? What sort of statistical design? Under what parameters might we expect these results? If we got these results, what does it mean in the real world? There will be a lot of, I think a handful of questions as they relate to statistical theory, right? And again, these are things, of course, that we'll cover in class, but you'll be expected to take the things that you've learned in class and be able to apply them to novel situations, novel problems. Exams 1 and 2, they're each worth 15% of your grade. The final exam is worth 10% of your final grade. Don't miss an exam, right? Missing an exam is strongly discouraged. If I choose to give you a makeup, that's up to me. It better be a heck of a reason. If I do give you a makeup, it's going to be all short answer questions, right? And again, just a reminder, there are no makeups for missed quizzes or worksheets. And this is how all of the weighted assignments break down, right? So again, worksheets, homeworks are worth 50% of your grade. Pop quizzes are 10. And the exam 1 and 2 are each 15, and the final is 10. So all that adds up to 100%. I do want to warn you that these weightings are not reflected in the grade book on Canvas, right? So Canvas will just give you sort of a running total of your points divided, the points that you've been awarded divided by the total number of all possible points in the class. And that is not how I do the assignment. Or if you want to figure out how the weightings work, what you would do is find your overall grade that you got for all the worksheets. Like, let's say you did all the worksheets and you got an 85%, right? So you'd convert that percent to a proportion. So you take it, instead of 85%, you say it's 0.85, and you multiply 50 times 0.85, and that'll give you the value that you get for your worksheets. Same thing for pop quizzes. Let's say you got 90% on your quizzes. So you'd go 10 times 0.9. That'll give you another value. Let's say you got a 75 on exam 1. So you'd go 15 times 0.75. You do that. You take the grade, the proportion of the grade that you got on all these assignments, multiply it by its weight, and then add all of those up, right? And that'll give you what you should get for the class. So again, just to be clear, grade weightings are not reflected in the grade book on Canvas. Okay, so I'm almost finished here. Just a couple more things I want to say. I know students worry about stats, and I know stats can be quite scary, particularly in an online environment where you don't have sort of ready access to the professor that you might have when you take any other class. So just a few things to think about. Like, even if you're not that confident in your math skills, it's going to be okay as long as you work hard and as long as you stay organized. The math that we're doing in this class is not terribly difficult. The hardest part of this class is making sure that you keep everything organized, right? Organization is key. You'll find that as we learn more about the statistical test that we run, you'll find that a lot of these equations involve multiple steps, right? I've described that a little bit. The idea is that you compute one equation, you get an answer for that, you put it in your second equation. You get the answer for that, you put it in your third equation, right? So you always want to make sure that you're organized and your work is clear at every step of the way. So for example, I have, don't worry yourself about this, but I'm just showing you as an example. One of the things we're going to learn how to compute is standard deviation. So the first thing we're going to compute is something called the sum of squares. And that's a value that we're going to need to plug into our next equation that we call variance. And once we have a value from that equation, we're going to plug it into the final equation that computes our standard deviation. So as you can see, there are three distinct steps that generate three different answers that are all applicable to the entirety of the problem. So you just want to make sure that you stay as organized as possible. You also want to make sure you do all of the worksheets. Like, not only are they worth 50% of your grade, right? But the worksheets and the quizzes really tie quite well to the exam, right? If you're using your worksheets and my answer keys, the quizzes, if you're doing the practice problems that are at the end of all of my lectures, all of this stuff is going to link quite well to the exam. And I think you're going to, when you open the exam to take it, it'll be a challenge still, but I don't think that you'll feel terribly panicked, right? You'll be like, okay, this is a good challenge. It's hard. It's fair. But I know this stuff and I can do it. And again, compare the work that you do to the answer keys that I post on Canvas. I post those answer keys for a reason. I spent a lot of time making them, and they're designed to help you, right? So if you're accessing the answer keys, you get a look into the logic that I use to solve some of these complex problems. And while you're doing your homework, have the lecture slides open. Have your book around you, right? Have all the tools you need to succeed. You definitely want to stick to the schedule too, right? And this can be very easy to sort of get away from when you're in an online class. But remember, this is a Tuesday, Thursday class, right? It doesn't mean that there's not a lot of latitude in terms of, how you work your schedule. But you want to treat it as if I were you. I don't care whether it's after work. I don't care whether it's before work, lunch break, whatever. But every Tuesday, Thursday, for sure, you want to spend a little bit on time on Canvas. Make sure that you're keeping up with everything you're supposed to. If you do that, you're going to, if you read each chapter, for example, according to the schedule and the syllabus, I might give you a pop quiz that day. You're going to ace it, right? And if you're keeping up with the readings, at the very least, you'll have a primer about what I'm going to discuss in lecture that day, which is helpful, right? Because sometimes the readings, particularly in a math textbook, aren't necessarily very clear, but they're still worth doing. And if you do those readings prior to watching the lecture, it enhances the lecture experience. You get more out of it. Again, check Canvas every Tuesday and Thursday. Just treat checking into Canvas on Tuesdays and Thursdays as you showing up for class. And I would also try and answer the posted practice problems that I have in the back of each lecture that I do. Most of them are I think it's the odd questions that have the answers in the back of the book. And I've tried to do my best to pick odd questions so that you can do them and then see the answer. But some of them, I just thought some of the better questions were even questions. But do those practice problems, particularly if you find yourself struggling with a chapter. And then the last thing I'll say is reach out to me right away if there's something you don't understand, especially in an online environment. The last thing that you want to do here is suffer in silence, right? Because it's very easy to, if you don't understand something, that can carry over to the next chapter, which can carry over to the next chapter. You sort of get this snowball effect because you didn't understand something earlier in the class. Now, let me also state that, you want to make sure that you've done all your due diligence on your end, right? Don't use me as a crutch. Always make sure that you've done the readings. Always make sure that you're turning in the assignments. Always make sure that you're watching the lectures, right? And then, again, if there's something that you don't get, then reach out to me. I'm happy to help. And then just sort of the last thing I'll say is relax, right? There's no busy work in this class. Everything that you do is designed to help you build a skill. It's designed to help you succeed in the content in this class. And you can do it, right? You can add, you can subtract, you can multiply and divide. You can do exponents, square roots. That's as hard as the math gets. It doesn't get any more. Maybe a couple times we might have to find x, but that's it. So you can do the math here, right? Any college student should be able to do the math required in a statistics class. The key, like I said, is just keeping your work clear and organized. And if you put in the effort, you'll do quite well. So that's it. That's the course content, what you can expect. I do want to remind you, like I said in the announcement, if you haven't already, please take that little questionnaire that I've got posted up that will give me some data that we'll be able to use throughout the course of the semester. So we'll run some statistical analyses as a group on that data that you guys gave answers to. Again, if at least 80% of the class takes the survey, I'll add points to everybody's final exam. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, be sure and let me know.